Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video I'm going to have a look at the latest from the live radar, run through the UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, as we are going to see a continuation of these fairly mundane conditions over the next few days with lots of cloud, quite dry conditions but a bit of rain, especially further northwards, but it's all going to shift into next week. You can see a massive pattern change as we now have high confidence that we're going to see a pretty cold and potentially wintry pattern arrive for the start of January. Now, I'm not talking the first week of January, I'm literally talking the 1st of January is looking likely. That is when the cold air will arrive for most areas, and the longer range charts today are throwing up some very interesting scenarios. They are still conflicting with these smaller details like timing, longevity, snowfall, but they're all in pretty strong agreement now that we are going to see cold, if not very cold air moving in for the first few days of January and lasting for much of next week, or from Wednesday onwards, of course, New Year's Day onwards. And today, even the ECMWF is probably the most wintry chart, and it does show a New Year's Day blizzard for parts of England and Wales. We'll look at that in the second half of the video. Make sure you stay tuned. It is a very interesting charts coming from these models today. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. Now, if you start on the live radar, you can see mundane conditions at the moment. We couldn't be further from seeing wintry or snowy conditions at all. We've got this big area of high pressure with very mild, moist air aloft, and that means we're seeing lots of cloud and outbreaks of drizzle, especially in the north. We've got a slight, brief little weather front that moves through. Now, it isn't a particularly strong weather front. It's not combined with any real deep areas of lower pressure. Therefore, it's just a little bit of an uptick in the cloud, and as a result of that, we are seeing some outbreaks of light to moderate rain. So pretty miserable here for Scotland into Northern Ireland, and it is going to slowly drift southwards over the next couple of days, and into the weekend it should shift eastwards, and it will open the door to some slightly fresher, drier air, which will still have some showers in it, but it should allow some clearing in the clouds. So we should see a bit of sunshine through the weekend into the start of next week, and then the properly cold air arrives for around Tuesday, maybe the 31st, as said, in the north, and then New Year's Day for other areas. Now, do look at the temperatures today. We're calling this around 1 PM on Boxing Day. You can see it is a fairly mild day. Not massively mild, not kind of 15 degrees like we have seen this time of year recently in the last few years, but it's still pretty mild, a good couple of degrees above average. Now, if you go over to the latest UKV now, you can see as we head through the coming hours, that weather front will slowly drift southwards, but it does take its time as it does. And you can see into the 27th, still that rain is mostly across Scotland, but we are seeing bits and bobs elsewhere. Into the weekend, though, that weather front slowly drifts away. Thick clouds still in force for Saturday, but into Sunday, we do see a bit of a drier slot, so some clearer skies. And then a larger weather front arrives into Scotland, and this is starting to divide us between the mild air and the very cold air. So the very cold air is just to the north of this, but it doesn't move through immediately. It does linger to our north as we still have westerly momentum. But once that clears, this weather front shifts southwards, and then the very cold air starts to plunge in. And then with this low pressure system, once this clears, back edge on that, that is when we see that cold northerly plunge in for New Year's Day. So we're here on the 31st. You can see it does arrive for Scotland, and there is the risk of some heavy snow here. But again, details are still very much up in the air because of all the different factors, like the freezing level, like the dew point, like the exact upper air temperatures. As you can see here, the exceptionally cold air is just to our north. Look at that. It is slightly darker there because it's under the banner, but minus 12 isotherm is just to our north. That is exceptionally cold air that is slowly moving in. I doubt that sort of strength will reach southern England, but can't rule out minus 8 to minus 10 degree isotherm getting for southern England, and that would be cold enough, especially this time of year, to produce ice days and bring the risk of widespread snow wherever we see precipitation. Dew points as well look freezing to our north. So once that air mass gets in, as long as we don't see any massive mild sectors move in, I don't think we'll have a problem with precipitation falling as snow. So yes, if you are looking for something wintry, not seen it over Christmas, but into early January, then there are encouraging signs. Now, if you go over to the max temperatures now, you can see this afternoon for Boxing Day afternoon, it's not a massively mild day, but it's not, cold really. It's kind of 7 to 11 degrees. You may think it feels cold out there, but it's nowhere near as cold as what we can see this time of year. We are high single digits, which, yes, compared to summer temperatures, is very cold. But compared to what we'd expect this time of year, it is a good couple of degrees above average. We kind of expect 5, 6, maybe 7 degrees at best this time of year. 7 degrees is the minimum we're seeing in some spots. So yeah, pretty mild, if we're being completely honest. Into Friday, it starts to turn a bit chillier in the south, only 5 or 6 degrees, and I think that is slight inversion taking place underneath the high pressure, underneath the cloud. So it's pretty miserable there. Again, it's more localised. Mostly, though, is still average to above average. Into the weekend, we start to see that clearer slot moving in from the north, and you can see temperatures again in the far southeast are cold under the higher pressure, but further northwards we are slowly shifting towards average, more in terms of the mid-single digits there. And then into Sunday, again, it is quite varied, but turning much colder across northern Scotland, and into 30th, the same for northern Scotland, and then into the 31st. Look at that. A massively distinct cold front appearing there, even in the 2 metre temperatures. Sometimes it's difficult to see exact weather fronts in the 2 metre temperatures. It's much more apparent in the upper air temperatures, and that's because of the diurnal range at the surface. We do kind of oscillate up and down quite quickly with daylight. And you can see, of course, here we've got a very, very strong weather front appearing here, even over the sea, which is quite unusual, as I said. Those sea surface temperatures normally do moderate those 2 metre temperatures substantially, so it is difficult to see the exact points of the change in air mass. But yeah, very distinct air mass shift here, 6 or 7 degrees there, going from freezing across northern Scotland to 8 or 9 degrees in some spots across northern England and southern Scotland. And that cold air is sweeping in for all. Now, if you look at the latest GFS, all runs, as I said today, are showing colder conditions, but there are some deviations, especially in the longevity, I must say. There is some disagreements with that. And again, that is something to worry about, next week, but it is still something to keep an eye on, as it could have downstream impacts. Now, you can see high pressure is in control, but it's slowly stepping away to our east, and eventually you can see a northerly wind is lining up to fire in. However, we've still got this higher pressure to our south, and it slowly clears as this low approaches, and that brings that snow for Scotland. Eventually that clears, and then we open the doors to very cold northerly winds. Look at that air mass, it is exceptionally cold. We've got a very big wedge of cold air just to our north, so this sort of northerly wind at another time of year, earlier in the winter, or at a point where the tropospheric polar vortex is stationed more towards the other side of the pole, it wouldn't be this cold. But because we have got a big lobe of exceptionally cold air towards Greenland, Svalbard, extending towards Iceland, it means this northerly wind is going to be a couple of degrees colder than just this kind of a standard northerly in this sort of situation. Now, it remains very cold for a number of days. Eventually, though, high pressure does build in, and that means that it would turn drier, less likely to see snow, but the temperatures would be exceptionally cold. We're at the coldest time of the year, late December, early January. We've both got very limited sun strength, very short days, and very cold upper air temperatures, all things colliding together to produce exceptionally cold conditions. And this is what we'd see here into early January. If we look at those 2 metre temperatures overnight, we're looking at widely -2 to -5 degrees, up towards -10 to -15. And again, this is a low resolution, long range run for 8 days' time. You get the high resolution runs on this, I wouldn't even be surprised to see -10 degrees, potentially across parts of England and Wales in some rural spots. Exceptionally cold conditions would be expected in this scenario. But as I said, because high pressure is building in, we would lose the risk of snow. And into the subsequent days, we eventually see more of a westerly wind moving in. The high pressure block has transitioned eastwards into Scandinavia, and long term that could produce something colder again. But on this latest GFS, it just lingers towards Scandinavia, halting the jet stream a little bit, but does eventually turn us milder. Now, you'd see here that you'd think, oh, this is only kind of a 3 to 5 day cold spell. A northerly wind arrives, it lingers for a couple of days, and eventually high pressure topples in and clears within about 5 days. However, as we'll see from the ensembles at the end of the video, the GFS and even the ECMWF operational runs go milder, much faster, and much more, in terms of magnitude, much bigger as well in that air mass shift than the majority, than about 90% of the ensemble runs. So I don't know if that's just the operational runs picking up on something, or probably more likely it's just a coincidence that both operational runs within their ensemble suite are on the sort of quick transition. Normally these sort of cold spells do drag out a little bit longer than forecasted. The models sometimes struggle to deal with very cold, dense air. So sometimes these air masses do hold on a little bit longer. But you'll be able to see what I mean at the end of the video. They really do stick out like a sore thumb there within the ensemble suite with how quickly they bring us out of very cold air. So if you're looking at this and thinking, oh, it's only a few days, it's a colder snap, less so a colder spell, then I would just caveat with that. The ensembles are much more sustained into early January. Now, if you compare to the GM, it's been fairly pessimistic over the last few days, but it is on board eventually with this northerly flow. Again, you can see the high pressure shifting eastwards, that northerly wind getting unlocked, and then pretty cold and unstable flow, most importantly, with small areas of low pressure within that flow mixing with the cold air, meaning snow would be pretty widespread by this point, and that's, I think, similar to what we're seeing from the ECMWF in a minute, and it stays very cold and pretty blocked all the way out towards day 10 there. Eventually a bit of a westerly flow moving in, but we are under higher pressure, and there's a risk this could ridge further northwards and try and turn us colder once again. But again, that'll be something we need to wait and see for the longer charts here. If we do finish by looking at the latest ECMWF, if I just quickly refresh it, try and get all the way to 360 hours, you can see high pressures in control at the moment. Eventually, those northerly winds will be arriving, but it's as these low pressure systems clear eastwards, wrapping within the cold air here for New Year's Day. This channel low produces substantial amounts of snow. New Year's Day blizzard, and I'll show you the precipitation charts for just a minute. It is... I can't really emphasise how perfect it would be if you're looking for heavy snow in the south. Of course, it's not optimum if you've got to go to work or got things to do in early January. But if you are a snow lover and you want to see something substantial, potentially even historic, falling on New Year's Day, then this is kind of the optimum chart. Eventually, though, that little New Year's Day blizzard clears and we see a very strong northerly wind continue all the way to the end of the week. However, similar to the GFS, we eventually see the high pressure topple, and it kind of sits over the top of us, still pretty cold and chilly, but there'll be limited snow and temperatures will probably start to rise above freezing. And then towards the end of the run, we continue to try and see ridging northwards, but you can see here it's running last week's run for some reason. But at least the last frame we've got from Thursday morning's run, you can see high pressure is in control. It most likely will be cold, inversion taking place, chilly, but no more snow because we're under that higher pressure. But as I said, we'll look at the ensembles in a few minutes' time, and you'll see that there is a big shift in those ensembles being much colder for much longer compared to these operational runs. Now, to just show you that ECMWF operational run, you see the UK here, kind of the middle left of the screen. If we do go over the next few days, bits and bobs of rain in the north, and eventually some snow early next week as we do collide cold air, that very cold air, with this low pressure system. There could be some substantial snow for central northern Scotland. These systems normally shift southwards, not expecting it to shift hundreds of miles southwards. That would bring kind of England and Wales and potentially Northern Ireland into play. But potentially, 50, 100 miles further southwards could bring more of the central belt into play. We'll have to wait and see for that next week. But substantial snow in places there. And then eventually this next system arrives for New Year's Day. And look at that, exceptionally heavy snow across much of England and Wales. Very high precipitation rate, eventually clearing into the 2nd of January. It would be very cold and exceptionally snowy there for the early part of January. Eventually it does topple, and as we head towards the 2nd week of January, we do see it clear, and it does go drier, but still pretty cold. And we do sort of clear away that cold wintry pattern. But as I said, we'll look at the ensembles now, and you'll be able to see that it isn't exactly that clear cut. Now, do look at the latest GFS ensembles. You can see it's hovering around average later next week, well above average at the moment, but hovering around average early next week. And then we see this massive drop-off, almost 10 degrees drop-off there towards the 1st of January. And this is where we could see that very cold and potentially wintry pattern develop. Now, into the subsequent days, we stay very cold. And that continues through much of the first kind of 7 to maybe even 10 days of January. But then look at this thicker green line. This is the GFS operational run. And look at it spike there around the 6th or 7th of January. It is by far the mildest run, and it really does stick out with this big spike as a southwesterly wind arrives, whereas the majority of ensemble members are average to below average, and you can see quite a lot of precipitation spikes here with that operational run. So you can see why I say it sticks out like a sore thumb. Majority keep us chilly, maybe yes, of course. Confidence decreases as we get out to that longer range, there's more scatter, but the operational run is by far on that mild end. Most still keep us cold, and some keep us very cold. And you can see the 2 meter temperatures here emphasize that significantly. Look at that, keeping us very cold, low single digits at best. Operational run gets us into the low teens. So that's why I said, although yes, good to look at the operational run, it's good to take note of it, good to illustrate the overall pattern. You can see here, longer range, it does disagree significantly with the other ensemble suite. The one thing, though, I will point out is look at the shift in temperatures for the first day of 2025. It's almost like we're changing season exactly as we change year. We're going from chilly conditions, kind of, late autumnal conditions, high single digits, low double digits, to exceptionally cold, freezing temperatures for the 1st or 2nd of January. Difficult to say exactly when the transition will be, but you can see here temperatures plummet away. And of course, these are ensembles. They're not particularly accurate, and they are at large time intervals, 6-hour intervals, so I wouldn't be surprised if temperatures were even colder than this is showing once we get to 2025. And if we do finish by looking at the latest ECMWF ensembles, it's broadly very similar. Hovering around average early next week. Big drop there for New Year's Day. A little bit more scatter over exactly how quickly it drops. And again, that's all due to resolving those low pressure systems that sit in that sort of cold flow. Again, would increase the risk of snow, but also would increase the risk of milder air mixing in. You can see though for early January, all are in agreement for very cold conditions. And eventually, they all remain below average. And then you can see the operational run there, again, sticking out like the GFS, going well above average. So I do have pretty high confidence now, very high confidence it's going to go cold for at least a few days, and pretty high confidence it's going to be a lengthy spell, at least 5 to maybe as much as 10 days if we're lucky. But a lot of uncertainty with that longer range prospects. All eyes though in the next few days, we'll see how those low pressure systems resolve around New Year's Eve, New Year's Day and the 2nd of January, as that will decide how quickly we go towards those cold conditions and whether we'll see significant snow in that transition. We'll have to wait and see, but very interesting signs as we do head into 2025. So anyway, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.